And welcome back to the On Your Side Republican debate for the primary for Superintendent of Public Instruction. In this next segment, each of our panelists has a direct question for a specific candidate that they have been thinking about. Bill Roberts from the Idaho Statesman, I'd like to start with you. You have a question for Mr. Grover tonight.
I do. As superintendent, you will serve on the State Board of Education. For more than 2 decades, the State Board of Education has annually voted to raise college tuitions to the points that some members now believe they are pricing students out of the market. How will you approach increased tuition requests from the universities?
Well, that's a great question, Bill, and we still have some of the lowest tuition rates around the United States. Our universities are still very much affordable to most people in Idaho. I think it's important to talk about working on that board. You're one voice on that board and one vote on that board. And where I have the experience working with the local school board now, from being the superintendent and creating policy and curriculum, I have that experience of working with that school board. And so being able to take that experience and now take it to a state level and work with the state on figuring out what is an actual cost of tuition. You know, with dollars going down over the last few years, the universities have had to also make cuts, and they've added new programs as well. And so just to keep their doors open, they've had to raise their tuition rates to pay their bills. So the question will come down to what is an affordable rate, and it's going to be, again, bringing in the stakeholders, bringing in not only the state board, but bringing in those higher ed universities and those folks on how they can raise those dollars and make sure that they can keep their doors open and affordable for our Idaho students.
My co-anchor, Don Nelson from On Your Side, a question for Mr. Jensen tonight.
I have got a question for you, Mr. Jensen. I have a son and a daughter, both in middle school. I don't believe they're dating yet. At least they haven't told me. I haven't seen any boyfriends or girlfriends running around. But in a recent article in the Idaho Statesman, you referred to the distractions that serious relationships can have on both boys and girls heading to the high school level. I see you're smiling already. You said, quote, "You start dating for 2 or 3 months, and that takes over your life. I don't want them to have complicated lives." So the question is, what role does the state's top educator have when it comes to the social environment of the student outside the classroom?
Well, that's a great question. You know, the great thing about being a principal for 25 years at the same school is that the majority of my students now, I had their parents as students at middle school. And so it really helps me look at the big picture and realize that if a student misses a test or does something wrong, it's okay. They'll grow up. Some of my very best parents now, when they come to school, they remember the day that maybe I suspended them or got mad at them. I don't remember that. But I think what's real important there is that the superintendent has to make sure that they keep that big picture vision. That most importantly, what I love is when one of my ex-students who now is 34 or 35 comes back to me and I talk to them and they're happy. They have strong relationships in their life. They have a great family. They have a career that they really enjoy. And when they tell me that, that's what brings my greatest joy. And that's how really I think we need to judge our schools the very most, is what their student, the happiness of their student 15 or 20 years after they graduate. And so I think my role as state superintendent is going to be to make sure that we keep a focus on the big picture, on the whole child, and not just focus on small things, but really keep a vision of the big picture.
Thank you very much. Our partners at Idaho Education News, Kevin Richard, you have a question for Mrs. Ibarra.
Yes, I do, and I kind of wanted to go back to the early education pre-K discussion we had earlier. The Republican Party platform is pretty adamant about pre-K and basically rules out publicly funded pre-K. You want to look at the research. You seem to feel like the research is fairly supportive of the idea of pre-K. How do you navigate the politics of this when so many members of your party are so steadfastly opposed and have drawn a line in the sand on this issue? How do you navigate the politics?
That is a great question, and I think part of the answer lies in the question that you asked me. I am not weak in my ability to lead others. I've already proven that through my leading a failing school to 4-star status, and I think it lies in navigating that correctly, leading others to see the research that every dollar that you invest in that is an $8 return. And kindergarten used to be the place where kids prepared for their academic future, and now they are part of the academics. So those are some of the items as a future state superintendent of public instruction and a leader who is responsible. I will advocate for those students and what's best and in their best interest.
A lot of hard-hitting questions from our panelists. Thank you very much for those. Really quickly, I just want kind of a single answer here, a single thought. If you were going to walk into that office on your first day after being elected and you put your iPad out in front of you and you were about to make your to-do list, what would be the topic at the top of the to-do list?
That is a wonderful question, and at the top of my to-do list is part of having a vision for the future. And I would like to address our approach. And our approach is in addressing the whole child and not having a business-like approach to education. Folks, schools are not businesses, teachers are not assembly lines, and students are not manufactured as outputs. And so our approach in addressing the whole child is actually the difference between efficacy and efficiency. Efficacy is related to the business approach, and that means focusing on the output. Efficiency is the means to the end and how a student learns developmentally and what's appropriate and stretching the dollar. And so I would focus on that approach and addressing those top 3 priorities: 21st century abilities, safety and support, not over-testing our students, and making sure that we are not taking the efficacy model and business-like approach, but the efficiency model to addressing the whole child.
Ibarra, that's a pretty long to-do list, including some vocabulary lessons on top. Mr. Grover, let's skip over to you. What would be at the top of the to-do list?
It's student opportunities. How do we make sure that everything that we're doing in education, from the dollars spent to the teachers in the classroom, how are we making sure that our students are being prepared for after graduation? You know, and that's my to-do list. Everything that we need to do in education has to answer that question. How is it benefiting our students? You know, I have 3 daughters, and my expectation for them is that they will be successful in life, and that's going to start with a good education. And they're getting a good education now, and we just want to make sure that it's even better for my kids and for all the parents out there that have kids in school.
Mr. Jensen.
Probably similar to-do lists as both Sherry and Andy, but I think one of the most important things I have to do that very first day is really start to assemble an all-star team to lead the state. The success I've had has always been by surrounding myself with the best possible people, and the state superintendent needs to do the same thing. He needs to surround him or herself with the best possible people so that they can serve the students best, so that we can be efficient. And by putting a team together of the strongest educators, the strongest people we can to lead our schools and to lead our State Department, that's critical. So first off is developing that all-star team of staff.
Long to-do lists. We'll make sure you have all the technology you need in order to get there. We have had a wonderful debate so far. Coming up next, we are going to wrap things up, allow each of our candidates to have a couple of minutes of closing time so you can hear directly from them. We are back next with the On Your Side Republican primary state superintendent debate.